The morning sun spilled through the windows of the small cafe, casting warm light over the tables and the polished wooden floor. The chatter of the early customers mixed with the soft clinking of cups and the hiss of the espresso machine. Behind the counter, the waitress moved gracefully, her hands busy but her mind at ease. She had worked at the cafe for several years, and even though it was not a glamorous job, she had grown to love the little rhythms of it. The smell of fresh coffee, the smiles of regulars, and the occasional playful teasing from patrons who enjoyed lighthearted jokes. As she carried a tray filled with steaming cups, she smiled at a couple seated by the window, their laughter echoing in the room. She had grown used to the laughter that seemed to fill the air, the jokes that bounced from table to table, and the casual atmosphere that made the cafe feel like a second home to many. She greeted everyone with warmth and a practiced cheerfulness that had become her signature. Most people only saw the surface. The friendly waitress who knew how to balance plates, remember orders, and make small talk. But beneath it, she held a secret. One that few could ever imagine just by watching her go about her daily tasks. She had always loved music, particularly the piano. Since she was a child, her fingers had known the keys as if they were an extension of herself. The piano had been her escape, her private sanctuary where she could pour out emotions she could not always express in words. She had played at small local events as a teenager, quietly impressing anyone who listened. Yet over time, the demands of life had pushed her away from that world. Work, bills, responsibilities, all of it had grounded her, and the piano had become a memory, tucked away behind her daily routines. But the love for music never left her. There were times during her shifts when she would hum a soft tune, letting the melody drift just beneath the laughter and noise of the cafe. She often caught herself imagining playing a song on a grand piano, letting the notes fill a quiet room, capturing attention and evoking emotion. The thought always brought a small, private smile to her face, and sometimes, just sometimes, she wondered what it would be like if someone heard her play now, in this ordinary place where people came for coffee and sandwiches, never expecting anything extraordinary to happen. The cafe itself was lively that morning. A group of friends crowded a corner table, laughing loudly at some inside joke, their laughter blending with the casual chatter of the other customers. A man in a business suit sipped his coffee quietly while reading the newspaper, occasionally glancing up to watch the interactions around him. The smell of fresh pastries mingled with the rich aroma of coffee, and the sound of the espresso machine sputtering and steaming added a comforting rhythm to the room. Every face she passed seemed familiar, yet each person had a story, a moment in their day that the cafe quietly became part of. As she moved to refill a cup, a few children at a nearby table giggled at a funny drawing on a napkin. Their laughter was pure and contagious, drawing smiles from the nearby adults. She paused for a moment, watching the simple joy in their eyes, feeling a quiet warmth in her chest. This was the world she navigated daily. Small moments of happiness, fleeting yet meaningful. And yet, she felt a quiet tug inside her, a longing for something more than the ordinary. She continued her work, taking orders, balancing trays, and chatting with regulars. One elderly man leaned on the counter and teased her about the new coffee blend, joking that she must have been trained by a secret society of coffee experts. She laughed along, handing him his cup with a wink. The cafe manager, a jovial person with a quick smile, passed by and offered a light-hearted comment about the morning rush. It was all routine, all familiar, and all comforting. Yet, in the back of her mind, the piano's call was like a faint echo she could not ignore. In the corner of the cafe, a small stage had been set up for performances that rarely happened. A dusty keyboard sat there, mostly overlooked, used occasionally for amateur singers or weekend open mic nights. Most days, it gathered a few curious glances but never much more. Today, however, she noticed it as she carried a tray past the corner. Something in her stirred, a whisper of possibility that she hadn't felt in years. She glanced around, catching the eye of the manager, who gave her an encouraging nod, unaware of the thoughts running through her mind. The cafe continued in its familiar rhythm. Customers laughed, joked, and went about their mornings, oblivious to the storm of ideas brewing inside the waitress's head. She wondered, not for the first time, what it would be like if she let herself play, if she allowed her hidden talent to spill into this ordinary setting. The idea was both thrilling and terrifying. She was used to being behind the counter, unnoticed in her skill, but the thought of stepping into the spotlight, even in such a modest space, brought a flutter of excitement she could not dismiss. As the morning progressed, a few more people arrived, filling tables and adding to the lively chatter. She carried their orders with practiced ease, smiling and making small talk, all the while imagining the feel of the keys beneath her fingers. The sound of laughter, so constant and bright, seemed to blur around her vision, leaving only the image of the piano, waiting quietly in its corner, like an old friend calling her name. The shift continued, each minute blending into the next, but the thought of the piano became more insistent. She found herself humming softly as she moved, a tune she had learned years ago, letting it drift through the air as if testing the waters. No one noticed, or if they did, they assumed it was just another cheerful hum from the friendly waitress. Yet inside, her heart raced with the thought that maybe, just maybe, today could be different. A couple of regulars leaned back in their chairs, finishing their pastries, still chuckling from some joke. The waitress paused by their table, setting down fresh cups, and allowed herself a moment to simply watch them. Life moved in small cycles, moments of joy and banter, and she had been part of it for so long. But there was a restlessness now, a gentle push from something she had almost forgotten. Music had always been her language, her way of connecting with the world beyond the routine of serving tables. The thought of ignoring it again felt heavier than usual. She carried a tray to the back, placed it down, and let out a small sigh. The piano called to her still, a quiet insistence beneath the laughter and clatter. For years, she had lived in the margins, unnoticed in her talent, and yet fully present in her work. But this morning something felt different. The ordinary day, filled with familiar faces and routine chatter, suddenly held a hidden promise. Perhaps it was courage, perhaps it was a longing that could no longer be ignored. Whatever it was, it settled over her like a soft weight, both comforting and electrifying. As she wiped down a table, she found herself glancing toward the corner stage repeatedly. The keyboard seemed to shine under the soft sunlight, almost as if it were waiting for her. She hesitated, letting her thoughts swirl. Could she really do it? Step away from her usual role, from the comfort of anonymity, and play in front of a crowd that expected nothing? The laughter that filled the cafe seemed to dare her, challenging her to make a choice. Her hands itched, the familiar memory of keys and melodies pressing against her palms. The morning continued, but time felt stretched and uncertain. She moved through her duties with practiced skill, yet her mind danced between the hum of conversation and the call of music. Each laugh, each clatter of cups, each playful comment became background music to the crescendo building inside her. She felt the stirrings of something powerful, a tiny spark that could turn the ordinary into something unforgettable. And as the shift moved toward midday, she realized that the day was quietly holding its breath, waiting to see what she would do. By the time the cafe was filled with more customers, the waitress's resolve began to solidify. The idea of stepping onto the small stage, of letting her fingers speak the language she had kept hidden for so long, no longer seemed impossible. The piano was no longer just an object in the corner. It was a bridge to a world she had almost forgotten, a way to transform the ordinary morning into something extraordinary. She took a deep breath, feeling a mix of nervousness and anticipation, knowing that the next choice she made could change everything, even if only for a moment. And so, amidst the laughter, chatter, and clinking of cups, a quiet determination began to grow. The cafe carried on unaware, but within its familiar walls, the stage was set for a moment that no one could have predicted. The ordinary day, so filled with routine and smiles, held a hidden chance for something remarkable, and the waitress, with her gentle courage and hidden talent, felt ready to take that step. The morning rush began to settle as the cafe slowly transitioned into the quieter part of the day. Tables that had been filled with chattering patrons now held only a few people sipping slowly, reading, or quietly talking with friends. The waitress moved through the space with her usual grace, clearing empty cups and replenishing water glasses. Yet her mind was elsewhere, wandering back to the piano in the corner, its keys catching the soft sunlight streaming through the window. The memory of the melodies she had played as a child filled her with both excitement and a nervous tension she had not felt in years. Her hands itched to touch the keys, to feel the familiar resistance of the ivory beneath her fingertips. Every so often, she caught herself glancing toward the corner, her heart skipping a beat at the thought of sitting down and letting her music fill the room. She knew the cafe patrons only saw her as the friendly waitress who served them with a smile, never imagining the talent she held within. The thought of exposing that hidden part of herself was both thrilling and terrifying. The manager walked past her, calling out a playful remark about someone needing to liven up the cafe. It was meant as a joke, and the waitress smiled politely, pretending she hadn't heard the challenge. But inside, the words lingered. What if she did play? What if she allowed herself to step away from the safety of the counter and let her music speak for her? The idea had been whispering in her mind all morning, and now it was growing louder, harder to ignore. A group of young people had gathered at one of the larger tables, laughing and joking as they shared pictures on their phones. One of them nudged another and joked about the music that might come from the old keyboard in the corner. Their laughter was light, playful, but it carried a hint of expectation, as if the cafe itself was daring someone to do something unexpected. The waitress felt her stomach tighten with anticipation. This could be the moment she had been waiting for, even if she didn't fully realize it yet. She took a deep breath, pausing near the stage to consider what she might do. Her fingers brushed the edge of the keyboard, feeling the cold smoothness of the keys beneath her touch. Memories flooded back, of recitals, of applause, of the thrill of performing, but also of nerves and mistakes and the caution that had kept her from playing for years. Yet despite the fear, there was a stronger pull. The desire to create something beautiful, to share a piece of herself with the world, even if only for a few minutes. The cafe was quieter now, the constant chatter replaced by soft murmurs and the occasional clatter of cups. She noticed that a few people had started glancing toward the stage, curious about the small instrument that sat alone and unused. The moment felt suspended, as if the room itself was holding its breath, waiting to see what would happen next. The waitress's heart raced, a mixture of nerves and excitement, pushing her toward a decision she had been avoiding for years. She imagined the music spreading through the cafe, notes filling the space where laughter and conversation had been dominant. She pictured the faces of the patrons, their surprise, their attention drawn to something unexpected and beautiful. The thought made her smile, a small, shy smile that carried a hint of daring. For a moment, she allowed herself to believe it was possible, that she could step up, play, and transform the ordinary morning into something extraordinary. A young boy near the front table clutched a cookie in his hand, watching her with wide, curious eyes. She caught his gaze and offered a small smile, feeling a rush of courage as he nodded in quiet encouragement. It was as if the world had given her a gentle push, reminding her that sometimes the smallest gestures can give someone the confidence to take a bold step. She straightened her back, letting her fingers hover over the keys, testing the air, feeling the familiar tension of anticipation that always preceded a performance. She took a deep breath, trying to calm the flutter in her stomach. The cafe manager, noticing her pause, gave her a questioning look, unaware of the internal struggle she was facing. She nodded politely, then turned back to the keyboard, letting herself focus on the keys. The first note, soft and tentative, escaped into the air. It was a gentle sound, almost shy, but it carried a clarity and precision that immediately drew attention. The patrons, initially surprised by the sudden music, paused their conversations. The group of young friends stopped laughing, the elderly man put down his cup, and even the children grew quiet, sensing that something unusual was happening. The waitress's fingers moved with confidence now, guided by years of practice and the deep love she had for the piano. The music began to grow, filling the room with a melody that was both haunting and beautiful, weaving through the air like a thread connecting everyone in the cafe. She let herself get lost in the sound, her nervousness fading as she became absorbed in the music. Every note was deliberate, every pause meaningful. The melody carried emotion, telling a story that words could not capture. She glanced around the room, noticing the faces of the patrons slowly changing. Surprise gave way to awe, casual conversation replaced by attentive silence. The cafe, once filled with laughter and noise, had become a place of quiet focus, every person present drawn into the spell of the music. Her mind wandered briefly, recalling the long years she had spent playing alone, hiding her talent from the world. She remembered the teachers who had encouraged her, the small recitals where she had felt both fear and exhilaration, and the countless hours spent practicing in secret. All of those experiences converged in this moment, and she realized that the music she played now was richer because of everything she had learned and endured. As the melody unfolded, she noticed subtle changes in the patrons' expressions. The children's wide eyes were filled with wonder. The elderly man looked deeply moved, and the group of friends sat in silence, their usual energy subdued by the beauty of what they were hearing. Even the manager, who had never imagined that the waitress possessed such skill, watched in astonishment, a smile spreading across his face. He had always known she was talented, but this was beyond anything he had expected. The music continued to build, each note resonating through the cafe, creating a sense of connection between everyone present. It was as if the melody was speaking directly to the hearts of the listeners, bypassing words and reaching something deeper. The waitress felt a sense of liberation, a joy that had been buried under years of routine and self-doubt. She realized that for the first time in a long while, she was truly seen, not just as a waitress, but as a person capable of creating something extraordinary. A soft murmur of appreciation began to ripple through the cafe, barely audible at first, then growing louder. Patrons exchanged glances, their smiles tentative but genuine. The music had shifted the atmosphere completely, turning an ordinary morning into a moment of shared experience, a quiet celebration of talent and courage. She felt a surge of confidence, her hands moving with even greater assurance, the melody becoming more intricate, more expressive, more alive. For a brief moment, the world outside the cafe ceased to exist. There were no worries, no distractions, no ordinary routines. Only the music, the room, and the shared connection between the performer and the audience. She felt the power of the piano, the beauty of the melody, and the wonder of being fully present in a moment that was both personal and communal. Every note was a declaration of her courage, every chord a testament to the years she had spent waiting for this opportunity. As the final notes lingered in the air, she allowed herself a moment of quiet reflection, letting the sound fade naturally. The room remained still for a heartbeat, as if the world itself was holding its breath, savoring the conclusion of the melody. Then, slowly, the patrons began to applaud, softly at first, then with increasing enthusiasm. The claps and cheers filled the cafe, blending with the echoes of the music she had just played. Her heart swelled with a mixture of relief, pride, and joy, knowing that she had taken a risk and it had paid off in the most extraordinary way. The waitress rose from the piano, her hands trembling slightly from the exertion and emotion. She offered a shy smile to the audience, her cheeks flushed with excitement. Patrons approached her, complimenting her skill, asking how long she had been playing, and expressing their astonishment at the unexpected performance. Even the manager, still smiling broadly, offered words of praise, acknowledging the courage it took to step out of her usual role and share her gift with everyone. The cafe was no longer just a place for coffee and conversation. For a brief, magical moment, it had become a stage where talent and bravery collided, creating an unforgettable memory for everyone present. The waitress realized that by taking a chance, she had not only shared her music but had also transformed the way people saw her, changing their perception from the friendly waitress to a remarkable musician capable of touching hearts. She knew that this day would be remembered, not just for the music, but for the courage it took to play, for the ordinary transformed into the extraordinary, and for the quiet joy of discovering what happens when one dares to follow a hidden dream. The music had settled over the cafe like a soft wave, wrapping every table, every patron, in its quiet power. The waitress's fingers moved with a confidence that seemed to grow with every note. She no longer thought about the audience or the fear that had gripped her earlier. She was fully immersed in the music, letting it guide her through the melody she had played countless times in the privacy of her own home. Each note was deliberate, carrying emotion that words could never express, and each pause allowed the sound to resonate in the hearts of the listeners. The patrons, initially curious, were now completely captivated. Conversations had stopped, phones were set aside, and the usual bustle of the cafe had faded into a calm reverence. The children sat wide-eyed, their cookies forgotten on the table, while the elderly man leaned forward, listening intently as though trying to absorb every nuance. Even the young group that had been joking earlier had grown quiet, their eyes fixed on the waitress and the music she produced. As she played, she felt an unfamiliar sense of power and freedom. The cafe, once a place of ordinary routines and friendly banter, had become a stage where her talent could shine, where she could connect with people without words. She realized that this was what she had been missing all these years, the ability to let her true self be seen, to share the part of her that had been hidden behind trays and smiles. The piano was no longer just an instrument, it was an extension of her soul. She shifted into a more complex part of the piece, the melody weaving through highs and lows, faster and slower, drawing the listeners deeper into its story. Every chord told a tale, every note carried emotion, and she could feel the room responding. Heads tilted slightly, breaths caught in surprise, eyes widened in wonder. The laughter and casual chatter of earlier seemed like a distant memory, replaced by a collective sense of awe. Even the cafe manager, who had seen her day in and day out, was mesmerized, leaning against a counter with his arms crossed, unable to look away. Time seemed to slow down. The waitress lost herself in the music, each movement of her fingers guided by instinct and years of practice. The melody grew stronger, more expressive, filled with passion and vulnerability. She could feel the energy of the room, the unspoken connection between herself and the audience. Every eye on her was a mirror reflecting her own emotions, validating the years of practice and the courage it had taken to step into this unexpected spotlight. She allowed herself to glance around, observing subtle reactions that made her heart swell. The young boy clutched his mother's hand, completely absorbed in the melody. The friends who had been joking moments before now sat with open mouths, disbelief and admiration written across their faces. Even the regular patrons, who had long known her as nothing more than a cheerful waitress, looked at her differently now. They were witnessing someone revealing a part of herself that had been quietly waiting for the right moment. As the piece reached a crescendo, the energy in the cafe became almost tangible. Chairs were leaned forward, hands clasped, breaths held, and even the hum of the espresso machine seemed to fade into the background. The music filled every corner of the room, resonating with something deeper than simple enjoyment. It stirred emotions, memories, and a sense of wonder. The waitress's fingers danced across the keys, fluid and precise, every movement conveying her passion and skill. This was not just a performance. It was an unveiling, a sharing of her inner world with anyone willing to listen. The patrons were no longer just watching. They were experiencing. Their attention was complete, their focus unwavering. The cafe had transformed from a place of ordinary morning routines to a temporary sanctuary where music created a bridge between hearts. Some closed their eyes, letting the melody wash over them. Others leaned back in their chairs, eyes glistening with emotion. Even the usually indifferent visitors, who had wandered in for a quick cup of coffee, found themselves drawn into the spell of the music. For the waitress, the sensation was intoxicating. She felt alive in a way she had never experienced behind the counter. Every note she played was a conversation, every pause a breath in the shared moment with her audience. She realized that she had been holding back for too long, hiding her gift out of fear, habit, and the constraints of routine. Now, in this ordinary cafe, she was not just serving drinks. She was creating something extraordinary, something that touched everyone present. The piece shifted into a softer, more delicate section, the melody slowing, becoming introspective. The audience leaned in, catching every subtle nuance, every gentle vibration of the keys. There was a hush over the cafe, a quiet respect that spoke louder than words ever could. The waitress felt a wave of emotion, a mixture of relief and exhilaration, knowing that she had successfully shared a piece of herself. The music was no longer just notes. It was an expression of years of hidden talent, of longing, of courage, and of joy. She let the final notes linger, delicate and fading, each one hanging in the air like a whisper. The room remained silent for a heartbeat, suspended in the aftermath of the music, as if everyone collectively held their breath. The impact of the performance was palpable. She could feel it in the way the patrons shifted in their seats, the way their expressions softened, the way they seemed to absorb the final echoes of the melody. It was a silence filled with awe and admiration, the kind of quiet that spoke volumes without uttering a single word. Slowly, the silence was replaced by applause. It started tentatively, a few hands clapping, then grew louder and more enthusiastic, until the entire cafe was filled with cheers, claps, and expressions of admiration. The patrons had been transformed from casual observers into witnesses of something rare and unforgettable. They called out words of praise, compliments, and expressions of astonishment. Some people even stood to get a better view, as if the performance had lifted them out of their ordinary morning routines into a moment of shared wonder. The waitress rose from the piano, her heart pounding, her hands slightly trembling from the intensity of the experience. She offered a humble smile, acknowledging the applause without words, feeling a deep sense of satisfaction and fulfillment. For the first time in years, she felt truly seen, not just as a waitress, but as a talented musician who had shared a piece of herself with the world. The recognition was not about fame or reward. It was about the connection, the shared experience, and the realization that courage could turn an ordinary moment into something magical. Patrons approached her, expressing their admiration and surprise. They asked about her training, how long she had been playing, and where she had hidden such incredible talent. The friends who had been joking earlier admitted they had never expected to witness something so extraordinary. The elderly man, still leaning on the counter, smiled warmly and said that he had never experienced anything quite like it in all his years of visiting the cafe. The manager, still standing in awe, nodded in approval, clearly proud and astonished by her performance. The atmosphere of the cafe had changed entirely. What had been a casual space filled with laughter, chatter, and ordinary routines was now a place that had hosted a truly remarkable moment. The patrons left the cafe with something more than just the taste of coffee and pastries. They carried the memory of music that had touched their hearts, of a performance that had brought beauty and emotion into an otherwise ordinary morning. For the waitress, the experience was transformative. She had stepped out of her comfort zone, overcome fear, and revealed a part of herself that had long been hidden. The music had allowed her to connect with people in a way she had never imagined possible, and the positive response gave her a newfound sense of confidence. She realized that her talent, which she had kept secret for so long, could not only bring joy to herself but also to others. The courage to share it had created a ripple effect, turning an ordinary cafe morning into an unforgettable experience for everyone present. As the applause slowly died down, she allowed herself a moment to breathe, to absorb the reactions and the atmosphere. She felt a quiet pride, a joy that was different from the satisfaction of completing a shift or making a customer smile. This was deeper, more personal, and profoundly moving. The performance had been more than music. It had been a revelation, a moment of truth, a demonstration of what happens when talent, courage, and opportunity intersect. The patrons gradually returned to their seats, still buzzing with conversation, but now with a new layer of excitement and appreciation. The cafe had been transformed, and the memory of the music lingered in the air, blending with the aroma of coffee and pastries. The waitress returned to her usual duties, carrying drinks and clearing tables, but she moved with a different energy, a quiet confidence that came from having embraced her hidden gift and shared it without hesitation. The morning that had started as ordinary had turned extraordinary, and she knew that it would not be forgotten by anyone present. The music had bridged the gap between performer and audience, between routine and magic, leaving behind a shared memory that would resonate long after the cafe doors closed. She understood now that her talent was not something to hide, but something to nurture and share, and that a single act of courage could transform the most ordinary moments into something unforgettable. The last note of the piano faded into the warm air of the cafe, leaving a silence so profound that it seemed to stretch time itself. For a few seconds, no one moved. Even the faint hum of the espresso machine and the occasional clatter of dishes were swallowed by the stillness that followed the music. It was a silence full of awe, the kind that made every person in the room realize they had just witnessed something extraordinary. The waitress sat there, her fingers hovering above the keys, feeling her heartbeat echo the emotions that had filled the room. She looked out at the audience, her eyes meeting theirs, and saw something she had never seen before. Pure, unfiltered amazement. The children stared wide-eyed, unsure whether to speak or move. Their cookies sat forgotten, their tiny hands gripping the table edges as they tried to understand the beauty that had just enveloped them. The group of friends, once laughing and joking, now sat with their mouths slightly open, their faces reflecting disbelief and admiration. The elderly man had a hand over his heart, his eyes moist with emotion, as if the melody had reached deep into memories he had long forgotten. Everyone felt the same unspoken truth. The ordinary moment they had expected had become something unforgettable. The waitress exhaled slowly, her chest rising and falling with a mixture of relief and exhilaration. She had taken a risk, stepped out of her comfort zone, and opened herself to complete strangers, sharing a hidden part of herself that she had long kept private. And in return, the room had responded not with mockery or indifference, but with awe, respect, and connection. She had never felt so alive, so truly understood, in the presence of others who didn't know her beyond the facade of a friendly waitress. The cafe manager finally broke the silence, his voice hushed but filled with wonder. He called out words of praise, clapping along with the growing excitement of the patrons. Slowly, applause began to ripple through the room, starting quietly from a few tables and spreading until the entire cafe resonated with appreciation. The sound was electrifying, yet different from ordinary clapping. It was heartfelt, spontaneous, and full of admiration for a talent that had been hidden in plain sight. The applause brought the waitress back into reality. She allowed herself a small, humble smile, feeling a warm blush rise to her cheeks. She stood, slightly trembling, acknowledging the room with a quiet nod. Each person who had been part of the moment seemed to carry their own personal reflection of it. The silence that had followed the music was now replaced with excitement, joy, and a deep sense of shared experience. She realized that what had happened in the cafe would linger in the minds of everyone present long after they had left. Patrons began to approach her, offering words of admiration and disbelief. Some wanted to know how long she had been playing. Others expressed how the music had touched them personally. The group of friends who had once joked about the piano admitted they had never expected anything so beautiful, their faces reflecting genuine astonishment. The children, still in awe, whispered about the sound and the magic that had filled the room. The elderly man gave a small, contented smile, patting her shoulder gently, a gesture of silent respect and gratitude. The waitress felt a surge of emotion as she listened to the words of praise. Her heart swelled with joy, pride, and gratitude. She had always loved playing, but she had never imagined the impact her music could have on others. This moment was a revelation, a reminder that courage and vulnerability could open doors to connection and shared humanity. She had stepped out of her familiar role, and in doing so, had created a memory that would last far longer than any routine day behind the counter. The cafe manager, still smiling broadly, encouraged her to take a bow, though she shook her head politely, feeling too modest to claim attention. Instead, she simply stood, hands clasped lightly, and allowed the room to continue expressing their admiration. The patrons' voices intertwined, a mixture of laughter, exclamations, and heartfelt comments. The room had transformed completely. No longer just a cafe, it had become a stage for something truly remarkable. A place where ordinary life had intersected with talent and courage to create a moment that would not soon be forgotten. Some of the regulars who had come in that morning saw her differently now. They had always known her as cheerful, friendly, and hardworking, but now they recognized her as something more. A person capable of extraordinary expression and artistry. The realization that someone so familiar could possess such hidden depth created a quiet reverence, a respect that was both humbling and inspiring. The cafe had always been part of their routine, a space for daily conversation and simple joys, but now it held an added significance, a memory of beauty, emotion, and unexpected talent. The young boy at the front table finally found his voice, asking softly if she could play again sometime. His innocence and sincerity touched her deeply. She smiled gently, nodding, understanding that this moment had sparked something in him, a sense of wonder and appreciation for art that could last a lifetime. The group of friends laughed quietly, shaking their heads in disbelief at what had just occurred. Even the elderly man, often quiet and reserved, offered a kind word of encouragement, his eyes reflecting the impact of the music as the applause gradually settled into murmurs of appreciation. The waitress realized that she had changed something in the room, something intangible yet profoundly felt. The atmosphere of the cafe had shifted. It was no longer just a place for coffee, conversation, and light-hearted banter. It had become a space where people could experience connection, emotion, and awe. The music had broken down barriers, allowing strangers to share a moment that transcended routine and expectation. It was a reminder that beauty could emerge unexpectedly, that courage could transform the ordinary into the extraordinary. She returned to her duties, carrying drinks and clearing tables, but with a new sense of confidence. Every step she took, every smile she offered, was infused with the quiet strength that came from knowing she had revealed a part of herself and been embraced for it. Patrons continued to speak in low tones about the performance, their conversations tinged with amazement and wonder. The cafe felt lighter, warmer, and more alive, infused with the memory of the music and the courage it had taken to share it. Throughout the rest of the day, she caught herself glancing back at the piano, a gentle smile playing on her lips. She had discovered something fundamental, not just about her talent, but about herself. The music had allowed her to connect, to be seen, and to touch hearts in a way that serving tables alone never could. It had given her a sense of purpose beyond routine, a reminder that even in the most ordinary places, extraordinary moments could emerge when one dared to step forward. The cafe's patrons slowly left, carrying the memory of what had happened. Some lingered longer, hoping for a second glimpse of her talent, while others left with stories they would recount later, amazed at the unexpected brilliance they had witnessed. The waitress watched each person depart, feeling a quiet satisfaction, knowing that a single act of courage had created ripples far beyond what she could have imagined. The cafe had become a vessel for memory, emotion, and shared human experience, all sparked by her decision to play. The manager approached her once more, this time with a more serious expression, though his eyes still held pride. He suggested that they consider having more regular performances, knowing that the magic of what had occurred could be a new tradition for the cafe. She nodded thoughtfully, realizing that this was not just a one-time moment, but the beginning of something that could redefine her life and the lives of those around her. The piano, once a neglected corner of the room, had become a symbol of possibility, a reminder that hidden talents, when shared, could create unforgettable experiences. As the day progressed and the cafe returned to a more typical rhythm, the memory of the silence and applause lingered in the air. Patrons who had been present carried it with them, their conversations punctuated with references to the extraordinary performance. The waitress moved through her shift with a new lightness in her step, a quiet joy that came from having embraced her hidden potential. She had learned that even ordinary moments could hold the power for transformation, that courage and vulnerability could create beauty, and that sharing one's true self could leave a lasting impact on the world around them. By the time the evening approached and the cafe began to empty, she felt a deep sense of fulfillment. The silence that had followed her performance had been more than a pause. It had been a moment of collective recognition, a breath held in admiration, and a shared acknowledgement of something extraordinary. She had turned a simple cafe morning into a memory that would resonate with every person who had been present, a reminder that even the most ordinary days could contain moments of wonder if one was brave enough to seize them. As she closed the cafe for the night, she allowed herself a final glance at the piano, the instrument that had been both her secret and her salvation. She ran her fingers lightly over the keys, feeling the familiar texture and warmth. A smile spread across her face, a mixture of pride, gratitude, and anticipation. The silence, the applause, the transformed faces of the patrons. All of it had left an indelible mark on her. She knew that her life, and the lives of those who had witnessed her music, would never be the same. The ordinary had become extraordinary, and it had begun with a single act of courage. The morning after her unexpected performance, the cafe felt different, even though the tables, chairs, and coffee machines remained the same. Patrons entered as usual, but there was a subtle buzz in the air, an undercurrent of excitement, as if everyone was aware that something remarkable had occurred yesterday. The waitress moved through the cafe with her usual grace, taking orders and serving coffee, but she did so with a quiet confidence that had not been there before. She carried herself differently, aware of the talent she had shared and the connection it had created. Word had already begun to spread. A few regulars, still amazed by the performance, spoke to new customers about the extraordinary event. They described how the waitress, usually cheerful and friendly, had played the piano like someone far beyond her years of experience. Her music had captured everyone in the room, and the memory of it lingered in their minds. The cafe manager had even mentioned the performance to colleagues at other cafes, marveling at the unexpected talent hidden in one of their staff members. The waitress felt a mix of emotions as she prepared coffee and cleared tables. Pride, excitement, and a sense of responsibility swirled together. She had always loved music, but she had never imagined it could affect others in such a profound way. Her life had changed in an instant, though nothing outside the cafe had shifted. It was a quiet transformation, subtle but powerful, like the ripple of a pebble thrown into a calm lake. By midday, a few visitors had arrived specifically to see if the story was true. Some had heard from friends, others had read about it on social media. They came curious, eager to witness the talent everyone was talking about. The waitress noticed them immediately, recognizing the anticipation in their eyes. She felt a mixture of excitement and nervousness, knowing that she could share her gift again, but also aware of the pressure that came with expectation. When a few of these patrons asked if she might play something, she hesitated at first. Her fingers brushed the edge of the piano, memories of the previous day's performance flooding back. She remembered the silence, the awe, the applause, and the joy of sharing something deeply personal. Taking a deep breath, she decided to let the music flow once more. As her fingers touched the keys, she felt the familiar thrill, the joy of creating, and the quiet satisfaction of being fully herself. The melody began softly, filling the room with warmth and emotion. Patrons paused, some whispering to each other, some holding their breath in anticipation. The music had a gentle start but quickly grew, carrying the energy of yesterday's performance with it. The cafe, though still busy with the usual routines, became a sanctuary once more, where the beauty of music and the courage of one person transformed the space into something unforgettable. As she played, she noticed subtle shifts in the atmosphere. Regulars who had seen her countless times were now viewing her with newfound respect and admiration. New visitors were captivated, their eyes wide and attentive. Children leaned closer to their parents, pointing out the beauty of the sound. Even the manager, who had always known she was capable of talent, watched in awe, marveling at how the music could shift the mood and energy of the entire room. After the performance ended, applause once again filled the cafe, genuine and heartfelt. Patrons approached her, expressing their amazement and gratitude. Some asked questions about her musical background, how long she had been playing, and whether she had ever performed in public before. The waitress smiled humbly, explaining that she had always loved music, but had never had the courage to share it outside private moments. The reactions of the audience made her realize the impact of stepping out of her comfort zone, of letting others see a hidden part of herself. The cafe manager suggested that they consider organizing small musical events regularly, recognizing the effect her performances had on the patrons. The waitress nodded thoughtfully, realizing that this could be a new chapter in her life. The piano, once overlooked in the corner, had become a symbol of possibility, a way to connect with people beyond serving coffee and food. She understood that her music could inspire, uplift, and create moments that mattered deeply. Over the next few weeks, the cafe slowly transformed. Patrons returned not only for coffee and pastries, but also hoping to hear the music that had touched so many hearts. The waitress began to balance her work with her music, sometimes playing short melodies between orders, sometimes performing more extended pieces during quieter hours. Each time, the effect was the same. People were captivated, moved, and reminded that beauty could appear unexpectedly in the most ordinary places. The experience also changed the waitress personally. She carried herself with more confidence, her smile brighter, her interactions warmer. She discovered that courage was not a one-time act but a habit that grew stronger with each choice to embrace her talent. Her music became a source of joy not only for others but for herself, a reminder of her passion, her skill, and her capacity to create moments of connection. One afternoon, a small local event organizer approached her, having heard about the cafe performances. They invited her to play at a community gathering, assuring her that her music would touch a larger audience. The idea was both exciting and intimidating, but she accepted, remembering the feeling of transformation from the first performance. She realized that stepping into new experiences, no matter how frightening, could open doors she had never imagined. The community event was a resounding success. People who had never been to the cafe came to listen, drawn by the stories of the extraordinary music performed by the waitress. She played with confidence, allowing her emotions to guide her fingers and her melodies to fill the space. The applause, cheers, and heartfelt compliments reinforced what she had already learned. Sharing one's gift, no matter how hidden or unexpected, could inspire, uplift, and create memories that lasted a lifetime. Back at the cafe, her regular patrons continued to respond to her music with warmth and admiration. The atmosphere had permanently changed. Laughter and conversation were now intertwined with moments of appreciation for her talent. The cafe had become a place where ordinary life and extraordinary moments coexisted. A space where people came not only for food and drinks but also for inspiration, joy, and the experience of witnessing hidden talent revealed. The waitress often reflected on the journey that had brought her here. She remembered the countless days spent hiding her passion, the nervousness that had held her back, and the courage it had taken to step forward. Each time she played, she felt a sense of gratitude for those moments of hesitation because they made her decision to perform even more meaningful. She had learned that vulnerability could be powerful, that sharing one's true self could create profound connections, and that ordinary days could hold extraordinary potential. As the cafe continued to thrive, she noticed how her music affected not just the patrons but also herself. It gave her a sense of purpose and fulfillment that went beyond routine tasks. She found joy in seeing people's reactions, in creating a moment of beauty that could lift spirits, and in knowing that her talent could inspire others to embrace their own passions. The act of sharing her music had become a source of daily motivation and happiness. Over time, she began to receive small invitations to perform in other local venues. These opportunities allowed her to expand her audience, challenge herself, and grow as a musician. Each performance reinforced the lessons she had learned. Courage, vulnerability, and the willingness to step into the unknown could transform not only her life but also the lives of those who listened. She embraced each new opportunity with excitement, remembering the first moment she had dared to play in the cafe and the profound effect it had on everyone present. The cafe itself became known as a place where unexpected beauty could be found. Patrons who came for coffee discovered music, laughter, and inspiration. Regulars returned with a renewed sense of appreciation for the space, knowing that something extraordinary could happen at any moment. The atmosphere was lighter, warmer, and more connected, reflecting the ripple effect of one courageous act. It was a reminder that hidden talents, when shared, could create lasting impact and joy. The waitress continued to balance her work and her music, but she did so with a new sense of purpose. She understood that her life had changed, not because of recognition or fame, but because she had embraced her gift and shared it with others. Each day became an opportunity to create moments of connection, to inspire, and to bring beauty into the ordinary. She realized that courage was contagious, and that by taking a single step, she had transformed not only her own life, but also the experiences of everyone who had been touched by her music. Years later, when people recalled the story of the cafe and the waitress who played like a prodigy, they spoke of more than just talent. They remembered the courage it took to reveal hidden potential, the transformation of an ordinary day into something unforgettable, and the way one person could impact the world simply by embracing and sharing their gift. The music had become a symbol of possibility, a reminder that extraordinary moments could emerge in the most unexpected places, and that even the quietest, most ordinary individuals could create ripples of beauty and inspiration. And so, the waitress continued to serve coffee, pour smiles, and play her music. Her life had been transformed, not by grand stages or fame, but by the courage to step forward and the willingness to share her heart through music. The cafe remained a place of ordinary routines intertwined with extraordinary moments, a testament to the power of talent, bravery, and the magic that can happen when someone dares to shine.